America is two things, gun and burger. Okay, that's it. America only has two speeds, gun and burger. Sometimes burger gun. Don't touch either of those things. Update happening now from Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. All right, let's dive into some serious that's not so fun.
To make sure that the day ended well and that everyone else was safe. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and start my remarks. Today truly is a sad day for Madison and for our country. It is a day that I believe will live in our collective minds for a very, very long time. Here are the details. Today at 10:57 a.m., our team was called to the Abundant Life Christian School in reference to an active shooter. We know that 3 people are dead, including the suspect shooter. We know that the suspect shooter was a teenage student who attended the school. At this time, we're not releasing the age or gender of the student or any other identifying remarks about the student. 2 other people have died. That died were a teacher and a teenage student. 6 other people were injured. 2 students are now in critical condition in the hospital, and these injuries are considered life-threatening injuries. 4 students are also at other area hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries. But these are just the physical injuries that we know about. We know that this was the middle of the day of a school day, and so there will be other injuries that we'll have to face for a very, very long time. And we're going to do everything we can as a community to heal those injuries as well. Many of you have asked me about the why of this. Why did this happen? What do we know? What was the motivation? I do not know. But I will tell you this, our detectives are working hard in the investigative process to find out as many answers as we can so that we can further prevent these things from happening, not only in this community, but in other communities around our country. I think we can all agree that enough is enough, and we have to come together to do everything we can to support our students, to prevent press conferences like these from happening again and again and again. The school building itself is clear. We have cleared the school. There's no other threats or danger to the community. We're in the process now of what we call reunification. And what that simply means is making sure that every student that was in the school is present and accounted for and returned to their loved ones. This usually takes a while, but we have practiced, unfortunately, and practice, and that's why we're able to reunify students with their parents within hours of a school shooting. The reunification is taking place at the Dean Clinic on Stoughton Road, and I certainly thank them for their help. Again, we need our public to find an alternate route. If that is your normal way home as we get closer to the end of the day, please be patient or find another route home. We're currently processing the scene. We're interviewing those who may have been witnesses, and we're obtaining search warrants to get additional information. And lastly, I want to just say thank you to everyone who's standing behind me, the organizations and agencies that they represent, the men and women of the Madison.
I want to remind everybody that America is the only country where the police do not advocate for more gun control. Just something to consider.
Many of you know
America is the only nation on the planet where police coalitions do not advocate for more gun control, but less gun control. They either never mention it or are directly antagonistic to gun control. Every other country, in every other nation, cops are oftentimes at the forefront of advocacy for gun control.
To do everything possible to ensure that it's not only a special place, but a safe place as well. And we're going to continue to do that. So we ask for your patience as information is coming in.
That's how busted American minds are. That's how busted we are as a nation. Gun control is not a leftist position. Working people cannot be disarmed. Yeah, man. Shut up. You're okay. America is already in the throes of fascism, and your dumbass is over here being like, "Oh, gun control is not a leftist position." Yes, it is. Okay, yes, it is. Reasonable gun safety measures is absolutely a normal position. It's not left or right. It's just common sense. You're a goddamn idiot fantasizing about a violent, militant vanguard revolution that is never going to happen. Shut the fuck up.
Fire department is a part of this community, much like all of the folks standing up here with me today. Our hearts are with and our arms are around everybody impacted today and everybody within our community. With that, I won't repeat the details.
Yeah, they think common sense is disarming the working class. Like, I'm sorry, dude, if you're a psychotic person, like if you're a chronically depressed person, you shouldn't be able to have a gun, okay? Straight up. You could call me ableist all day, every day. I'm the most ableist mother on the planet, okay? If you are a person who routinely experiences mental health episodes, you should not be able to have a gun because you will use that gun either on yourself or on others, okay? It is incredibly likely. Sorry, it's just the truth. And I find it very strange that you can't even talk about this. Like, there's this broken understanding is so embedded in the minds of every dumb Amerifat that, like, you even find this supposedly Marxist position on, no, the working class must be armed to the gills, like to the arm to the teeth. Meanwhile, the American government's response to now, I believe the number is like 14 veterans killing themselves every single day, is basically telling them, like, here, we'll give you a free lock on your gun safe. And put a photo of your family in that gun safe too, so you don't yourself in the last moments. Like, you look at that, and there's like one extra hurdle that you need to overcome in the moment. That's how up the situation is. I don't understand. I say this as someone who enjoys shooting guns, okay? I say this as someone who enjoys shooting guns. The notion that, like, guns are anything but a fun hobby is ridiculous. The idea that, like, we are more safe because we have more guns is demonstrably false, and yet people still make this argument. It is so shocking, especially in the eve of yet another mass shooting at another school. That encourages depressed people to keep it to themselves, though. I wouldn't associate depressed people with mentally deranged mass shooters. What are you talking about? 50% of the gun violence that happens in this country happens because people kill themselves with guns. What are you talking about? Yes, dude, if you have suicidal ideation, you shouldn't have a gun. It literally makes the process easier, okay?
And the governor and others in the federal government and state
How do you enforce laws on a subjective medical diagnosis? You force it by law at the federal level. You say, if you want a gun, you need to not only get an adequate fucking brain dead take. Yo, you for propagating a stigma that you're not at all qualified to talk about. I love this, dude. I love this. I love when dumbass Amerifats come in here and chirp at me about how you don't understand. You're actually stigmatizing mental illness by saying people who are chronically depressed should not be able to have guns, because I believe that the primary purpose of government is to protect its citizenry, okay? Sometimes that means requiring to wear seatbelts when they're too stupid not to wear seatbelts. Sometimes it's to require not to drink and drive when they're too stupid to drink and drive. You will not be able to outwoke me on this context by being like, excuse me, sweetie. Excuse me, sweetie. You're actually being quite ableist. You're stigmatizing people with mental health. Yeah, dude. The overwhelming majority of people who are chronically depressed or have bipolar disorder or any number of different mental health complications in the community understand that reality. Okay, being depressed doesn't mean you can't decide your life is not worth living. You can value your own life while being depressed. I agree for more gun control, but saying depressed equals can't defend themselves. No, no, you're wrong. Okay, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. The notion that guns are necessary for self-defense is already a idiotic notion. Okay. You have eaten that propaganda hook, line, and sinker. This country will be infinitely less violent and infinitely more safe if we just wiped out all the guns. Now, you could say that's not going to happen. We can never do that. There's too many guns. There's more guns in circulation than there are people. And that's fine. I understand that. But you cannot argue against that reality. America, out of all of the other comparable OECD nations, is the one that has an overwhelming amount of gun violence. I wonder why. I wonder what the reason is. They have the same rates of mental illness, okay? We have comparable rates of mental health complications in this country. Why do we have significantly more gun violence? Because we have more guns. That's it. And we have no restrictions on who can have those guns. And it is unironically a direct byproduct of the interest, the for-profit interest of gun manufacturers, which is why it blows my mind that so many quote-unquote lefties will eat that propaganda hook, line, and sinker, not realizing that you are serving the interests of gun manufacturers so they can turn profits. It's so stupid. America is literally the only place on the planet this exists. In Australia, I cannot simply comprehend someone like my dad with bipolar and depression with diagnosed with cancer saying, hey, my son, check out this new gun I bought from Walmart. Yeah, gun for me, but not guns for thee, head ass. No, guns for nobody. Or if you're gonna have a gun, it should be heavily restricted. That's it. The primary purpose of a weapon is to end life, okay? That's it. That's the primary purpose of a weapon. It's fun to shoot it. I get it. I shoot it. I enjoy it. But people should be able to demonstrate the responsibility of owning a weapon like that. People should have to at least identify themselves when they are purchasing a weapon. People should be able to go through rigorous background checks and mental health checks before being able to purchase a weapon with the primary purpose of ending your life or ending other people's lives. Saying that everybody should be able to get a gun is basically saying like everyone should be able to, everyone should be able to get a driver's license. Like we have restrictions, and cars are a necessity for commerce. Cars are a necessity to be able to function in a car-reliant infrastructure. Guns are not a necessity in the same vein. It blows my mind that people still make these arguments every time there's another mass shooting. Okay? Why is restricting murder machines such a issue? It should be more regulated than cars than anything else. I know. Jesus, bro, is just talking and not explaining why I was wrong. Wait, what? You said I'm wrong and that you're telling me and then claim I'm an IRA shill? What? I think I demonstrated why you're wrong. Okay? Guns are for self-defense, not a hobby, is a falsehood that the gun lobby and the gun manufacturers have concocted. The likelihood that you will accidentally discharge or use the gun inappropriately is infinitely higher than you actually using it to intercept a situation where your life is in threat. Okay? There are a million studies on this. So the notion that guns are for self-defense is already stupid. It's completely made up. But it's one that is so pervasive. It is a narrative that is so pervasive that has unironically created a need for guns because everybody has a gun, so you got to have a gun as well. It's literally, it's just so stupid. In so many instances of mass shootings and whatnot, okay? The overwhelming majority of mass shootings or overwhelming majority of shooters are actually apprehended and stopped by unarmed, law-abiding citizens, okay? They swarm, and that is after the killer usually ends up shooting a bunch of people. This is why you have a gun problem. Listen to these crazy chatters. Yeah, this is a community that's supposed to be like super progressive, and yet even in a community of like super progressive, like-minded individuals, there's still going to be a ton of people who are just like, I love guns. I love guns, and I think like everyone should be able to have them. I love guns, and I'm going to overthrow a tyrannical government. In the immediate aftermath of yet another mass shooting that occurred at another school shooting, one of the most obvious problems in modern American society is the mass availability of weapons, and how much that has very clearly increased gun violence. Do you think these guys will be there with their guns to overthrow the tyrannical government when Donald Trump refuses to relinquish control? No, of course not. Of course not. I do not have an issue with people having guns, okay? Although I believe that we would be living in an infinitely better society if, nobody had guns. Having said that, however, okay, and this is something that I've covered a million times over, at the very least, we need common sense gun violence prevention methods and that requires regulation and restriction. And the relatively modern false interpretation of the Second Amendment that plays a massive role in Americans politicizing their commodity fetish has caused this ginormous collapse and is a endless hurdle against this sort of thing. Everything, if we're going to talk about this from the perspective of like cultural signifiers, like things that we associate with our identity, guns, just like every other commodity, is not just a thing that you own for a purpose. It's not like your pan, okay? It's not like a replaceable commodity. It becomes something more than that. When you own a gun, you become a gun guy. You know, you have a gun, you like guns, you know the different kinds of bullets, you learn more about guns. There's an endless sea of information out there on YouTube and on social media where you can just like get, you know, you can get gun magazines. You become a gun sexual. It becomes a part of your life. It becomes a part of your identity. And not only is it a part of your identity, even though it's basically just like no different than like purchasing Gucci bags or some shit, okay? And that's like your hyperfixation, that you like fashion or whatever, and you like, you know, Gucci bags. So you just buy a bunch of Gucci bags. Hassan is such a lib on this topic. No, I'm not. And if you think, if you're mistaken common sense with liberalism, then that's your fault. Yeah, I'm such a lib on this topic. People love China, okay? People talk about like how dope China is, okay? And how socialist China is. What are the Chinese gun laws then? See, my hot take is a gun pervert. I think firearms also reflect like an ego thing. I see firearms as cool, but not different than like a really cool power tool. Not as a flex type thing, because people will take selfies with their AR-15s, but I've never seen someone take a selfie with a Milwaukee impact driver. Yeah. No, that you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right about that. People are like, paternalism is bad when it comes to guns, and then advocate for universal health care. Yeah, no, all matter of government action is paternalistic. You are supposed to write rules and restrictions and regulations for the dumbest person in society. That's how you protect people, both from themselves and potentially from others as well. That's in the most reductive terms, that's what governance is about. Okay? Anyway, here, let's continue.
Yes, obviously, once we have identified, we have initiated a search, but we think that search is either ongoing now or that search may be concluded. Of course, it's about safety. That's the first thing. Making sure that people are safe.
Oh, so mentally ill people are the dumbest people in society? I don't know, but you might be an incredibly dumb person if you think that that's the only people that shouldn't have guns, is what I'm saying. If that's what you derived out of this commentary, then you might be both mentally ill and also one of the most intellectually disabled people I've ever encountered on this website. And there's plenty. It's a target-rich environment.
Some of your patients.
Are you aware, had the school had any prior threats? And then just, jumping off of that, do you know if the shooter had any prior contact with law enforcement?
We do not know that the shooter had any prior contact with law enforcement, but I did do a check of the school. There were some calls, but they were like 911 hang-ups, things of that nature. There was nothing that suggested that the school was a place that violence would occur.
Chief, I know that you mentioned that the shooter died of a self-inflicted gun wound. Did that happen before officers arrived at the school, or when the shooter saw officers coming into the school?
Yeah, so let me say that the cause and manner in which the shooter died will be determined by the inmate. But what I can tell you is the shooter was dead upon our arrival, police department arrival, and no officers fired their weapons. Okay?
Lucas, what are these search warrants?
Oh, look at that. Yet another.
Are they at the residence on like a device?
Look at that. Yet another shocking instance where.
I'm sorry.
Yet another shocking instance where a mass shooting ended with the shooter themselves or possibly being apprehended. That's usually how it goes.
And make sure that everyone is okay. And then if there's any evidence that we think we need to collect, we could only do that with the use of a search warrant. And so, again, we have to determine if there is evidence that we will need. Everyone wants to know what led up to this. Are there any additional threats to public safety? Is this person or was this person by themselves? There are a lot of questions that we want to answer, but we have to answer the safety questions first, and then we'll move on to some of the more investigatory questions.
Are you in possession of any of the shooter's devices?
I am not, no.
Catherine?
I'm wondering about metal detectors. You mentioned in the first meeting that you were not a fan, and that this school probably doesn't have them. And do you know other schools that do? Do you think that that's something we should start talking about, metal detectors in schools?
I guess the question is, would you want your child to go to a school with or without metal detectors?
I can't answer that.
I can't.
Right now,
Yeah,
without them.
yeah,
Yeah, more
absolutely. So
metal
the idea
detectors.
is to create the safest environment that we can without metal detectors.
Wouldn't it
That
make
is my
sense to
answer.
arm the teachers? Yes, dude, totally. The solution to the problem is more guns, actually. Arm the teachers. Arm the children is what I say. I think the children must not remain unarmed. They should have the opportunity to defend themselves, you know? Just like Israel. Arm the kids. Israel has a
Schools
right to
and
defend itself.
obviously
The children
our
have a right to
holidays,
defend
our Christian
themselves. Arm
holidays are very
everybody.
important to the students, very important. It's a time for family. Students probably getting ready to go out on break. And now the break will be a little less about celebrating Christmas than more about celebrating
only way-
perhaps friends and loved ones and staff members.
The only way to
who
solve
perhaps lost their life.
society's
That's why
violence
I'm asking everyone
problem
to, of course,
is by
keep
creating more
Abundant
opportunities
Life,
of ultra violence.
Christian school in your thoughts and in your prayers, and we'll get a couple more, okay?
Okay, real quick, Phoebe.
So it's a private school that takes public money through the voucher system. So what has this revealed about maybe gaps in security or training for staff? Is that something you're thinking about whether schools that are private that take public money need to be, kind of on par with public schools when it comes to safety?
Well, what I'm telling you is that in 1997, I began my professional career as a public school teacher. I taught history for 4 years before becoming a police officer. So I did not get far enough to take courses in administration and budgeting of schools. I don't know what governs private schools, if they receive money, where that comes from. That would
This guy
probably
used
a
to be-
question
so this
that
guy
you
used to
would
be
probably
a
need to ask someone who's more
beneficial member of
involved.
society. How do you go from being a
requirements are if
teacher to a
they do
cop,
receive
dude? That's
that.
crazy.
But you could probably compare what has happened or what goes on, their security measures, with the security measures of any school.
How much you want to bet if they paid teachers better, he would not be in this position right now? He'd still be a teacher.
As you know, there has been some criticism to other law departments in their response to these school shooting incidents, particularly in Uvalde. How did that inform your game plan today, and how quickly were your officers able to get into the school? What were they told to do?
Sure. We train on this, as I spoke about earlier. When officers arrive on the scene, they immediately go in, which we did in this case. Stop the threat, stop the killing, find the killer. That's how we train. And that's exactly what we did today. There's no waiting. There's no coordination of who's in charge. Everyone knows exactly what to do.
I think this
I
is a
spoke
private
about
school.
this
It's a private
earlier.
Christian school,
We
I believe.
train on this constantly. Our commanders,
I gotta pee.
including the fire chief and I, was in a commander's training less than 2 weeks ago, going over this exact same scenario for another fictional location. And so all of that came into play today, and our officers performed extremely well based on their training and based on the expectations that they know exactly what to do. Stop the threat, stop the killing, find the threat.
Right, I promise to follow up. Can we just do one more?
We're gonna do one more.
For the current student. No, wait, hold on, right here, right here.
Thank you,
Hold on.
all.
Yeah.
I think the questions have been asked, and we're straying a little far from what's most important at this point in time, and that is the victims and their families. I have 3 things to add. First of all, there is a lot that our community can and will do in the coming days to support the victims and their families, and we will have more information at future briefings. If anyone, and I would urge you all to include this in your stories, if anyone needs mental health support as a result of this incident and the coverage of it, I encourage them to reach out to 988 by phone or text and to get the mental health support that they need. It is incredibly important that we take care of our community in this very difficult time. We all have a role in preventing gun violence. Our entire community needs to be part of the solution here. There are many things that we can do, and we can have those conversations in coming days. But first and foremost, what needs to be the priority for all of us.
Last I heard, there was never a
is
private school
supporting our young
shooting.
people.
Yeah,
And
no,
that is where our
it
community's
happens every now and then.
attention
It's
needs
just
to
less
turn
likely.
At this point in time. The police department, the fire department, the city, the county will share additional information about the investigation as it becomes available. But I urge you all to help our community find resources to support their mental health and to find resources to support the victims and families at this time. Thank you all.
Where can people go to see your updates? What can you tell them?
It'll be on cityofmadison.com. Me, Stephanie, and Cynthia will stick around and answer any other questions, but that's all.
Let me say just before I go, because the mayor mentioned that this was a whole of government response. It certainly was, and there's so many people that we want to thank. We cannot thank everyone, but it's also a whole of law enforcement response. Even though we are in different agencies, we all have the same training. And so I want to thank our partners with the FBI who are here with me today, partners with the ATF, Dane County Emergency Management. Of course, we already talked about our fire department. We've got calls from the Attorney General of the United States, Wisconsin State Patrol, our governor's office, State Patrol, Monona, as well as our sheriff's office. I know I may have left someone out, but thank you for how you responded, professionally, quickly, and according to the way that we all trained, and it all came together to ensure that no other persons were hurt. Thank you.
Chief, can you just say what time you guys made entry? We just want to nail that detail down.
10:57.
But
That's
that
the time you made
all
entry.
made entry.
in 1 minute?
We'll work on getting that, so our next,
How long does it take should they arrive to the city to raise back? They receive the call at 10:57.
Yeah, so I will work on getting that information.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, it is, we got to do a little bit of propaganda, you know what I'm saying? But we'll look at the final tally, which is so crazy to say. And I'll also tune into CNN to see if they're covering it as well, to see if we can get a better update. They're finishing off the thing. But I live close to the school and already hearing from parents is because of anti-Christian propaganda. Do you think the right will run, considering it's rare? I mean, any argument in the immediate aftermath of yet another school shooting that hyper focuses on the background of the shooter, mentality of the shooter, mental health, or potentially like the ideological reasons as to why they did this, which they will do, and Republicans do it all the time, even if the shooter is a Republican, and in most cases it is. Any argument that does not obviously point to the real problem here, which is mass availability of guns, is a simple distraction.
Christian school, a private parochial Christian school with about 400 students, K through 12. Police just confirmed the 2 victims killed were a teacher and a teenage student. 6 other victims were injured, including 2 students who currently are believed to have life-threatening injuries. Police got the call about the shooting just before 11 a.m. local time in Madison, Wisconsin. We learned moments ago that someone at the school called 911 to report the active shooter. Police say the shooter, who was also dead, was a juvenile, was a student at the school. Madison's police chief, Sean Barnes, noted earlier today this tragic event coming just 1 week.
A teacher and a teen student was killed in the shooting at Madison Abundant Life Christian School. 2 students are suffering life-threatening injuries in critical condition.
A little dismayed now. So close to Christmas. Every child, every person in that building is a victim and will be a victim forever. And these types of trauma don't just go
6
away.
other people are injured. 2 of the students are in critical condition with life-threatening injuries. The other 4 students were taken to an area hospital and are expected to survive.
After the nation marked the anniversary of a different
At this time, 3 people are deceased. During the media briefing earlier this afternoon, it was erroneously...
which left 20...
Wait, they're saying... During the media briefing earlier this afternoon, it was erroneously shared 5 were deceased. Again, 3 people are deceased. 9 in total were injured, including 3 deceased. And I believe 2 are in critical condition.
Surpassing last year's total by just 1. 2024 has now seen the most school shootings in a single year since CNN began keeping track of this horrific statistic in 2008. Let's get right to CNN's Shimon Prokopez and John Miller and Whitney Wild, who is in Madison. And Whitney, you're at the press conference. You just asked a question to Chief Sean Barnes. on whether the suspect was known to have had any other prior run-ins with the law. What did he say?
He said that the suspect was not known to law enforcement. I also asked if the school had had any threats, and he said they were really little surface things, 911 calls, hang-ups, things like that, but there wasn't anything that had indicated that violence would happen at that school, especially that violence would happen today. Jake, we did learn a little bit more. What we know is that someone from the school called reporting an active shooter, which the police chief says initiates a very specific protocol. The chief described an immediate response from law enforcement, although they did not say exactly what time they made entry. What we know is that that call came in at 10:57. I and other reporters here asked exactly what time did law enforcement make their way into that school. We are still waiting on that detail. Law enforcement is saying very little about the shooter other than to say it was a teenager at the school, Jake. They did not say the age of the shooter. They did not say the shooter's gender. But they did say that that shooter had a handgun, and we know from CNN's Josh Campbell that was a 9mm pistol, a very common type of handgun, very common type of handgun for gun violence. Further, Jake, we learned that this area was confined to one space, although the chief did not know if it was confined to a hallway or a classroom. Those are still details that we're waiting on. Jake, at this point, the chief does not believe that they had a school resource officer. That would have come from the city. It would have been one of his officers. He said he is not aware of that. Further, Jake, and this is something that we learned earlier today, but as well, finalizing this, that when law enforcement finally made entry, Jake, what they saw was that the shooter had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There are so many questions. The foremost, of course, Jake, is why. Here's what the chief said.
Many of you have asked me about the why of this. Why did this happen?
Wait, what? See, the liberals want you to believe we need to control our AR-15s. This young man just done shot up the school with a handgun, brother.
But I will tell you.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, man. You're right. No gun control at all. Okay? No gun control whatsoever. You're right.
Not only in this community, but in other communities around our country.
Jake, what we know is that the two other people who died, one was a teacher, one was a teenage student. At this point, there are 6 people who are in critical condition. The chief described that with life-threatening injuries. 4 other students have non-life-threatening injuries, Jake. Many more questions to answer here. We expect to get an update later this evening, Jake.
Isn't this embarrassing for America?
The police chief,
dude, Americans have no concept of shame. You can't shame people who are shameless. What do you mean? You think, like, broadly you can shame America or Americans? No, they don't give a f.
When they arrived?
Yes, that is the case. They believe that the shooter shot themselves. And I don't want to necessarily at this point, Jake, I don't think we're identifying the gender of the shooter. There are some questions. So we can't identify the shooter yet as male or female, as we heard from the police chief there. But yes, they do believe that the shooter took their own life, and it was in the process of their response. They responded, they got the call around 10:57 a.m., and then within 15 minutes, we heard this incredible tell from the fire chief there of how within 15 minutes, they had transported everyone from the scene to the hospital, including the shooter. The shooter was still alive when emergency officials responded to the scene, and then they even removed that person, and they were able to get them some treatment, but they died at the hospital. But the key here, obviously, Jake, is they're still working through trying to identify exactly the shooter.
And John Miller, a law enforcement source, says a 9mm pistol was used in the shooting. Tell us about that weapon.
Well, the typical 9mm pistol is a semi-automatic handgun. Most 9mm pistols can have a magazine that takes up to 14 rounds, which means if you have one in the chamber, that's 15 rounds. So this is a small, compact weapon, relatively easy to conceal, and one that gives you a large capacity of rounds to fire, which in a case like this, of course, just increases the damage, the danger, the impact. One of the things that we have learned throughout the terrible and repetitive history of mass shootings and school shootings, but particularly with school shootings, is that most guns come from the home. You know, when we ask questions like, how did this child in every place from Uvalde to other places, you know, obtain these weapons? It comes from the home in most cases. And with a teenager, this is one of the reasons that we hear the chief saying we're obtaining search warrants. When they go to search that home, they're going to be looking for the phone, the computer, the laptop, the things where they may find the building blocks, the planning, the writings about what led to this shooting to establish motive, any notes or communiques left behind where maybe the shooter put forth motive. But they're also going to be looking for, are there guns in the home? Are the guns accounted for? Is
police
this one of
shooting,
those
school
guns?
shootings are a white
Is
supremacy
one not
problem, not a gun
accounted
problem?
for?
It
Are there
absolutely
boxes,
is a gun
ammunition,
problem.
and
What are you
so on?
talking about?
Because they're going to want to obviously find out where this weapon came from.
You think other countries don't have white supremacy baked into their core identity? Why the don't they have mass shootings in other countries, school shootings in other countries? Every single thing that you can point to in the United States of America, all of the other components that you can point to, isolate and identify, exist in virtually every other country on the planet. Okay? The one thing that does not exist in other countries is the ready availability of guns, the number of guns in circulation, and the ease of access to weapons. That's it. I mean, not in the same way that the U.S. has white supremacy, just saying. That's delusional and also ridiculous. Okay? What are we doing? Oh my God, every single time, dude. This community has learned nothing from the past election cycle and the loss of the election cycle and how, like, staying on message is supposed to look like. That's crazy. Yeah, it's the white supremacy. Let's look at Madison, Wisconsin demographics in 2024. 7%, half the percentage. Madison, Wisconsin is 74% white. Is white people killing other white people? Not to say that there aren't Nazis in Madison, Wisconsin, but the notion that white supremacy was a primary factor here is so crazy. Like, what are you talking about? You don't know any of that. You don't know what the shooter's ideology is at all. We don't know anything yet. And you're trying to slap on like white supremacy as a reason for this. Yeah, it's white on white violence. I just like even if this is straight up a neo-Nazi that did the shooting, it doesn't matter. It could be a straight up neo-Nazi that did the shooting and said, I'm doing this for being a neo-Nazi. Guns are still guns, and their readily available nature of guns. Having more guns in circulation than there are people in this country is absolutely what makes it easier for these sorts of mass shootings to happen in a country where there are a ton of white supremacists and whatnot. It still doesn't matter, though. There are plenty of other countries where there's like active neo-Nazi movements. There are plenty of other countries where fascists have actually gotten control of governments. Look at Italy. Look at Germany. And yet they don't have the same number of mass shootings or school shootings that we have. That's it. Europeans literally look at us and go, what the fuck is going on? This is the one issue that every European social democrat would agree on, regardless of their other, ideological differences with me. They literally look to this and go, what is happening in America? Whenever I cover this, are you a gun control supporter? No judgment. I just don't think I've ever heard your thoughts on it. Yes. Of course I'm a gun control supporter. What kind of crazy question is that? Yes. I believe in good governance. The only time I can think of a similar thing occurring in Europe would be back in 2011 when a neo-Nazi killed a bunch of kids at a summer camp. That's the only time I can think of that mirrors America's mass shooting epidemic. Yeah. Right-wingers in a country outside of the U.S. look at our gun violence with the same eyes as left-wingers. Exactly. Switzerland is the only country in the European continent that has a higher gun ownership per capita rating than the rest of the nations. And yet, because of that reality, they still have more gun violence per capita than other countries. And having said that, it is still infinitely more limited. It's marginally higher than other countries in Europe. Having said that, however, it's nowhere near the gun violence per capita metric in the United States of America. I mean, it's a perfect example that it's a perfect demonstration that yes. Anyway, let's just watch President-elect Trump delivering remarks to the press. Is he talking about this gun violence or what?
Investors in the world, and we've just concluded a very productive meeting. And today I'm thrilled to announce that SoftBank will be investing $100 billion in America, creating 100,000 American jobs at a minimum. And he's doing this because he feels very optimistic about our country since the election. And many other people are also coming in with tremendous amounts of money. You probably noticed that a poll was just taken. It's business is literally in 39 years, there's been nothing like it. It's been the biggest increase. Small business owners gave it a 41% jump. It's the biggest jump that we've had in 39 years. And nobody's ever seen anything like it. And it's just, they're very optimistic. This historic investment is a monumental demonstration of confidence in...
Never mind, he's not talking about this. Okay. He's so pissed he won. He doesn't want to be talking about this dumb shit. Yeah, there's TikTok news as well. It's baked into our society. It's not that gun control is radical, but Americans are insecure when it comes to trusting individuals, i.e. need for self-defense, because I would kill to get ahead and so will they. Socialist clothing company founder creating disturbing most wanted CEOs playing cards in the wake of United Healthcare shooting. Socialist clothing company? What is this? The founder of a socialist apparel brand who was called online for the death of corporate executives was planning to sell a deck of cards of the most wanted CEOs, complete with names and faces decorated with illustrations of gun range targets. He was inspired by the most wanted Iraqi playing card decks famously distributed in the U.S. and coalition forces. James Har? Who cares, man? Alex Jones of the left. We're never getting gun regulation. There has to be another way. Alex Jones of the left, lol. Yeah. I'm an Alex Jonesian type of person because I believe that in spite of the many hurdles that, you know, I will never cease to advocate for what I believe is correct. And in this circumstance, it's actually what I believe is correct is has been implemented in so many other countries.
Thing like this where a female student comes in and you wouldn't have even put two eyes on the situation beforehand.
And Marisa, in terms of campus safety and preventing...
Alex Jones on the left be like, these school shootings are real and we should implement common sense gun safety regulations to, you know, limit the number of school shootings that do happen in the country, that it happens in increasing in increasing frequency.
What we see are common alarming behaviors.
Do you hear
beforehand.
yourselves?
And I'll tell you kind of the shorthand version of this is that the vast majority of students who carry out school shootings are students who are in crisis. They have problems they feel like they can't solve another way. They look to violence as a solution. Oftentimes, they either plan to kill themselves at the end or they're hoping for a suicide by cop. They're hoping responding law enforcement will kill them in the process because they don't want to live anymore. We have a lot of tools that can help someone who's at that point of desperation and doesn't know what to do, doesn't feel like they can cope with life any longer. And so what schools, like Steve was talking about, the Students of Concern Committee, Behavioral Threat Assessment Committees, these are eyes and ears within the schools and often with information that come from the student population because they are the first ones to likely hear or know if a fellow student is in crisis. They can take a look at what's going on for this student, talk with the student directly. Are you thinking about engaging in violence? Are you planning to do so? Why? What problem are you trying to solve? And then help that student solve the problem through nonviolent means. We see so many of these students engage in what the
leftist Alex Jones be like harassing politicians that are responsible for so much violence in American society instead of the parents of dead children in the aftermath of a school shooting.
Those are all behaviors that if they get to adults in school, the adults, especially when they have threat assessment training, can look further and say, what's going on with this student? How can we figure out are they considering violence? Are they feeling desperate? Are they suicidal? And how can we help stabilize that person and put them on a better path?
All right, Marisa and Steve, thanks to both of you. Really appreciate it. Coming up 1 week before Christmas, a young student has been killed. A teacher has been killed. How will Madison, Wisconsin even begin to deal with this horrific day? An area leader will join us next.
Dude, this is wild stuff. I swear. It's always like, it's just so commonplace. It's just so commonplace at this point where it's like we have streamlined the coverage. We have streamlined the coverage immediately. First of all, never let a good crisis go to waste. Okay, that's number one. What do I mean by this? Now we have like additional industries tasked with, designed with the purpose of extracting some kind of profit out of tragedies like this, where we now have, like, you know, gun violence, school shooting, gun violence related trauma experts. You know what I mean? You have, like, businesses dedicated to hardening schools because they're soft targets as it stands currently. It's kind of crazy. Like, the one thing that keeps spinning is the wheels of capital. No matter what happens, there's like endless tragedies, and yet we always seemingly find a reasonable market solution. And that doesn't mean that we're actually eliminating the problem. It's never about eliminating the problem. It's about trying to triage and I guess, like, stop the bleeding by, you know, making more money. Yeah, one man's tragedy is another man's opportunity. Owning guns puts people in your home at greater risk of being killed. New study shows millions of Americans may have already asked themselves these questions or versions of them, especially in the wake of horrific mass shootings like those in Buffalo and Uvalde. Record-breaking spikes in gun sales over the last 2 years, alongside surveys indicating that self-protection continues to be the dominant reason for buying guns, underscore a widely held belief that a gun in the home has security benefits. A new study from our research team recently published in the Annals of Internal Medicine shows no such benefits. We found the opposite. People living in homes with guns face substantially higher risk of being fatally assaulted. Mass shootings are the most visible form of gun violence in America, but they account for a small fraction of fatal shootings. 100% correct. It's the tip of the iceberg. Most of these deaths are lesser known, private tragedies that occur in homes and on the streets. We studied 18 million adults living in California. Nearly 2,300 of them that died by homicide over the 12 years of the study. Thanks to California's historical archive of firearm transactions, we can identify who in this enormous population personally owned guns and who lived with gun owners. The study's goals was to see whether homicides were more or less likely to occur in homes with handguns. Sorry, but if you spam by this before, apparently shooter was a rad fam that wanted to kill men. This is only from Twitter, but seems credible. No, it doesn't seem credible. You just said it's only from Twitter. We don't know anything yet. Well, that could be the case. It's ridiculous to go, I saw something on Twitter and now I'm running with it. Seems credible. What the hell? First of all, statistically speaking, if we're going to go by, like, I mean, this is pure speculation. But if we're going to go by, like, who the common perpetrators of gun violence and school shootings are, is most likely a cisgender, heterosexual, white dude. Okay? It doesn't even matter in this situation, and it doesn't matter in any situation. Like, people's ideological proclivities are, sure, informative. Okay? They're instructive. But what you fail to comprehend, what you fail to consider, is that other nations have similar tendencies. They just don't have the means of enacting this level of violence. And the reason why they don't have the means of enacting this level of violence is simple. It's because they do not have guns. I'd be shocked if it was actually a woman that did this mass shooting, because that would not be statistically the norm. It would be outside of the norm. Having said that, I reiterate my position in the aftermath of the Nashville school shooting, where the shooter was trans. That is the most American thing. Do you understand? It's the most American thing. Inevitably, it was going to be a woman that does a mass shooting or a school shooting. Inevitably, it was going to be a trans person that was going to do a school shooting or a mass shooting. That's just the reality of America. Oh, CNN confirmed the shooter is a female. Do you understand what I'm saying? I said this exact same thing in the aftermath of the Nashville school shooting, where the shooter was a trans person. It literally does not matter. Bro, we have like 70-year-old Asian men doing mass shootings. Do you know how statistically unlikely that shit is in general? That's just America, baby.
We heard there is not or was not a school resource officer at the school. It's obviously a private school. And I think that public schools in Madison might have school resource officers, but I'm not sure. Do they? And do you think more police resources should be deployed to all schools in Madison, not just public?
Yeah, well, I don't care about the statistical relevance either, Chatter, for the record.
And it's up to every school district whether they decide whether to have school resource officers or not.
I'm saying that, like, it doesn't matter what the shooter is. I'm saying that before I knew what the shooter's background was.
What I've been hearing is just the complete and utter devastation of what this means to those students, those parents, those loved ones, family members, and everybody that goes to not only the school, but
Why should
it is
my
a
rights
private
be
school, and
restricted when
because
it
it's a
only
private
addresses a
school,
symptom, not
it
the
impacts
problems?
more than just that neighborhood. You have people all over the county.
Dog, you know this argument that you're making, why should my rights be restricted argument you're making can be made for any rule, any rule, any restriction, any regulation. You understand that, right? You don't have a right to own a gun. That is ridiculous. The assertion that you have some God-given right to own a weapon is already a faulty premise to start at, okay? What you're quite literally, like, you sound like an NRA lobbyist. Card-carrying leftists in the chat talking like the dumbest sovereign citizen you ever encountered.
Tragedy. Also had a bit of the news-making remarks from President-elect Trump, commenting on his conversations with world leaders, the outgoing administration, and his cabinet picks and more. Stay with us.
Listen to Chasing Life with me,
Anyway,
Dr. Sanjay.
Chad, it sounds like an NRA shill. How will you make sure gun control doesn't just concentrate gun ownership in the hands of the right? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Feds have been in the Reddit board trying to make leftists like guns, like Gretchen. Wait, what? I mean, leftists do already like guns. American leftists do. American leftists are crazy. Americans are crazy. It's just like one of those issues where, you know how like even right-wingers in other countries are not so brain broken as to think like every person should own a gun. America is the exact opposite. Left-wingers, just like right-wingers, love their guns, okay? It's so funny to be like, whoa, what like, why are my rights being infringed on? Because this addresses a symptom and not the root cause of the problem. First of all, it is the root cause of the problem. Anyone that tells you that guns are not the root cause of gun violence as a problem is wrong. Secondly, every rule and restriction technically infringes on your liberties to do something stupid. Here are people in the 80s reacting to DUI laws.
Strict drinking and driving here is viewed by some as downright undemocratic.
It's kind of getting common is when a fella can't put in a hard day's work, put in 11, 12 hours a day, and then get in your truck and at least drink 1 or 2 beers.
They're making it laws where you can't drink when you want to. You have to wear a seatbelt when you're driving. And pretty soon we're going to be calm in this country. Calm in this country.
It's so crazy. It's just nutty. I don't know. As a Wisconsinite, I still agree with them in that video. No, I know. Yeah, what about my rights to drink and drive as a woman? Previous studies have probed that question with virtually all finding higher homicide rates in homes with guns, but our study had 3 novel features. First, rather than calculating the household as a whole, as the prior research has done, we focused on household members who live with a handgun owners, but weren't themselves owners. In other words, we tackled a secondhand risk of firearm ownership. Surprisingly little is known about the secondhand risk of a gun in the home. Imagine being able to separate the risk of smoking to smokers and the risk of environmental tobacco smoke for everyone else. That, unfortunately, is about where gun violence research stands today, at least partly because of the data needed to conduct such studies do not exist. California's archive is unique. You know what else California is unique on? Despite being a massive state and having a bunch of like weird loopholes as well, or weird laws, like patchwork of laws that make it less fun to own a gun and more annoying to own a gun, for example. All of those problems have led to one thing, and that is California's gun violence rates are lower than the national average. California's gun violence rates are lower than the national average. So is New York's gun violence rates. As a matter of fact, so is Illinois' gun violence rates, despite the fact that Chicago's right there. And even then, Chicago, most of the guns in Chicago are not coming in from Illinois anyway. It's actually coming from neighboring states that you can easily go to and get guns from. Gun violence statistic map. Guys, you're about to find out something incredibly shocking. States where there are less restrictions on access to guns have significantly higher gun violence rates. The one exception to this rule is Washington, D.C. And even then, it's usually proximity to other states where you can get guns with ease. You know this map. You've seen this map. I've shown this map many times over. D.C. is the one exception to the rule. Outside of that, virtually every single state, Mississippi, Louisiana, New Mexico, Alabama, Missouri, Montana, Alaska, Arkansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wyoming. I've skipped D.C. Wyoming, Arizona, Oklahoma, Georgia, Nevada, Kentucky, Indiana, Colorado, Idaho, Kansas, North Carolina, North Dakota, West Virginia, South Dakota, Ohio, Texas, Michigan, Virginia, Poverty also has to do with it, certainly. Do we know how socioeconomic status may confound these statistics? Yes, poverty plays a major role in this. Of course it does. It plays a major role in everything. But it's kind of like this. Americans used to say, why should I get vaccinated? That's just for obese people that could die from COVID. In a country where there is a 60% obesity metric, that means most Americans are obese. They need to get vaccinated. You can't fantasize about a country that we are not. You have to write rules and restrictions and regulations about a country that we are. Okay? Only poor people do gun violence in a country where most of us live paycheck to paycheck. I know. That's the other scary part of this dynamic as well. Also, how are you going to restrict it? You're going to just make only rich people have guns? That's crazy. I've noticed so many people trying to redistribute the blame. It's guns people. Guns are the common denominator. I know. And there are so many studies that point to this. It's one of those things that frequently loops back to the same problem that I constantly yell about. Okay? It is a lack of interest in identifying, critically thinking about anything, identifying what the actual problem is, looking at the common denominator, isolating it, and trying to tackle the problem head on. And when you don't actually do that, you just end up believing in a whole bunch of different conspiratorial things. You already forget the rich guy that shot a CEO? What? I'm not saying rich people don't have what are you talking about? I'm not even arguing against this. Like, you're literally arguing for a position that I do not hold. I'm done. I'm not doing that. It's a self-propagating issue, though. I only own a gun because I feel like so many insane right-wingers around me are going to get violent. I know. It's great. Everybody has a gun. Abundant Life Christian school officials asked for prayers on Facebook after the shooting. It's like saying Christianity caused this problem because it was a private Christian school. You know what I mean? I would never make that argument. The following list of the shooter are all anime accounts. We don't even... How have people found the shooter's account yet? The name has not been released. I believe CNN actually... Oh my God, dude, stop. CNN accidentally said she... Accidentally? They wrote a manifesto on Google Doc but forgot to give read access to it. Wait, what? I don't think this is the person. I think, how do you know this is the person? Yeah, just stop speculating on who the shooter is. Until the media confirms who the person is, the only confirmation that has come so far is that the Madison school shooter was a female, law enforcement official says. The suspect, who was a teenage student at the school, is also dead. No names have been released so far. And here's a great example of like people running with what they think is happening because they saw it online. You literally ran with faulty information. And in the process of running with faulty information, you ended up sending me the account of a dude who posted some memes, like 4chan ass memes. I repeat what I said. I repeat what I said when the Nashville school shooting happened. It literally doesn't matter. While the overwhelming majority of shooters are white men, for the most part, it still does not change the dynamic. It's America. Inevitably, people from every kind of background will probably engage in a mass shooting. And the reason for that is because the United States of America is an incredibly violent culture, has an incredibly violent culture, but more importantly than that, no access to mental health. But more importantly than that, last but not least, perhaps the most significant, has a ton of weapons readily available. It's happened before too. Female mass shooters are very rare, but it has happened in the past. What is up with your community stream? What do you mean? Here's what Tom Homan, the upcoming mass deporter in chief, is saying on Fox News. This is a parody account, or like not his real account, but this is what he says on Fox News, like Tom Homan.
Also, as President Trump is committed, we're going to deputize every U.S. citizen in this country to help us find 340,000 missing children, because we need the public's help on this. Every mom and dad knows what it's like. They have a gut feeling when they see.
This will be great. Yeah. No, this will definitely be good. I can't foresee this being massively consequential and horrifying. Deputizing every psycho, every armed psycho who now believes that like there is a stolen child every time they see like a brown person with a kid, deputizing the armed population. Why don't we address the mental health, the feelings of isolation, the lack of free public spaces, and economic problems? Great question, chatter, who keeps saying, why should my rights be restricted when it only addresses a symptom, not the problem? Okay. Great question from the chatter, the NRA lobbyist in the chat that is advocating for less gun control or no gun control while simultaneously saying, well, why don't we just advocate? Why don't we fix all the other problems? I don't disagree with you. I think we should fix all those other problems as well, which is why I advocate for those other problems every day of the week, including today. The issue here is, even if you were to solve many of these issues, there would still be a shit ton of gun violence, a shit ton more gun violence in the United States of America. You want to know why? Including suicides, for example. You want to know why? Because there's a ton of guns. That's it. It's that simple. It's so funny when people go, oh, dude, why don't we address the underlying material problems? Yeah, really? That's going to stop your 5-year-old from shooting you in the dick? Bro, this country is so insane with gun violence. Dogs have killed their owners. Okay? Dogs. How do you materially solve that problem? We have such an insane country with so much readily available weaponry that we've had. This is a country where a dog has killed their owner with a gun in the car. How do you solve that? What kind of mental health complications exist when your 5-year-old picks up your gun and shoots you in the head with it? It's ridiculous. And the irony here is that, once again, other countries with comparable rates of mental health problems, other countries with comparable rates of poverty, literally do not have the same level of gun violence. It's that simple. One must ask the question, why? They haven't solved those issues better than America, and yet they still have virtually no gun violence in comparison to the United States of America. Yeah. Toddler accidentally shoots mom, 22 dead while playing, what? With mom's 22, with mom who is 22 years old, dead while playing with unsecured gun, boyfriend arrested. Now, before you say, no true Scotsman, you're not going to solve all of these problems with gun control or whatever, but like, mom was 22 years old. Yes, is a horribly written article title. How do we know it's an accident? I say arrest the kid. What about other countries of similar gun ownership? What? There is no country on this planet with, like, I believe the exception of Yemen, that has a similar rate of gun ownership. And even Yemen does not come near the American rate of gun ownership. There is no country on this planet that has a comparable rate of gun ownership. Like, people talk about, I talked about Switzerland earlier. Not even remotely close. No other country comes near that. Look, yeah, Falkland Islands. And then number 3 is Yemen. And in every other country, whether it be Serbia, Montenegro, Canada, Uruguay, Cyprus, Finland, Switzerland, whatever, they all have gun control. No other country has nearly the readily available firearms rating, like the firearms availability per capita rating. And no other country has anywhere near the lack of gun safety, gun violence prevention measures that America demonstrates. America is 2 things, gun and burger. Okay, that's it. America only has 2 speeds, gun and burger, sometimes burger gun. Don't touch either of those things, please.